Find other great podcasts like this one at Podmoth.network.
Do you ever think about what your drag name would be if you did drag?
Ladyfingers. What about you?
I think I'd go with Watson. Watson your face.
Watson your face?
A mustache!
We are the Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy podcast. I'm Declan, the son.
And I'm Jane, the mom. This is the podcast where we talk about brutal crimes like serial killers and the random one-off murder. We will tell you about bizarre occurrences like alien abductions and monsters in the dark. And we just might get you drunk with cocktails themed around one of our stories.
At the very end of every show, we like to lighten things up and cleanse the palate from the tragic and terrifying stories. So we end our time with a chaser. You might get to hear crazy stories about our pets or just silly movie recommendations.
Give us a listen. We are the Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy podcast.
Welcome to Getting Down and Wordy, the etymology/music podcast.
I'm Russell Perkle.
I'm Hannah, and I am also on the podcast.
And today on this one, we are talking about the hit song from the Little Mermaid, Poor Unfortunate Souls.
Poor Unfortunate Souls, yes we are.
And along with the song in honor of Pride Month, I suppose,
Happy Pride Month, everybody!
We're also going to talk about drag. The word, its
drag.
Etymology and origins. How did a word meaning to kind of pull something along the ground come to mean to dress up in the clothing of what is considered to be the opposite gender of yourself, you know? We'll see. We'll find out.
You know what? That's a very good teaser. That's a taste of the magic of etymology, I think.
Yeah, we did it. We gave them a little taste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So June is Pride Month, I suppose. And of course,
well, all other months you are meant to hide in shame. In June, we cast off the shackles of shame and we go forth and be proud.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a controversial thing to say, but I always feel like as asexuals, I never really feel as if I know if we're included in the LGBTQIA plus team or not. You know, or rather, I don't know if they want us there or not. I guess is more the reality of it. You know what I mean?
I think I'm just such a contrarian. If I'm not invited, I want to be part of it even more. And also, I feel kind of queer. I just do.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, right? I feel that too. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, I kind of feel just not bothered by it. You know, it's like, I feel like it's okay if people want to conceptualize LGBT as a thing that does not include me. That's okay. I don't mind it, honestly.
For me, it's more like, even if I myself don't feel like queer enough, and guys, there's no such thing as queer enough. If you're queer, then you're queer.
You could always be
part
more
of the club.
You know, there's never.
You can
enough.
always be more. There's never too much queer. There's no ceiling on it. You can always add more queer.
As Matthew McConaughey famously said, those are rookie numbers. You gotta pump those numbers up, or whatever. All right.
I hate the thought of somebody else feeling like they don't belong somewhere that they would feel welcomed. So even if it's not something that I necessarily feel all the time as if I'm included, I definitely want other asexuals and people that are a little bit more alone and maybe not so as confident in their asexuality. I want them to feel included and welcome in the community. So I think on that level, I'm a little bit more, hey, let us in. But, I'm as queer as I am, and I've tried going queerer. It's just very difficult.
It's not as easy as they make it look on Bravo, that's for sure.
That's true.
Yeah, so in addition to Pride Month, which actually it's funny because it's not yet. We're recording on May 23rd, so in a way, as always, this is the pain of being a podcaster. You're always speaking to a world that you can never touch, because you're living in the past essentially. So we're not even feeling prideful yet. Unfortunately,
I am. I feel like I this is a secret treat, like opening up a birthday card a couple of weeks before your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a little guilty pleasure. It's coming. Pride Month is coming. I'm just indulging a little early.
It's Pride Month Eve. Yeah, and I mean, especially for this month. What was I? I was scrolling social medias as I always do, and I saw the Critical Role guy. What's his name? Matt Mercer, wearing a T-shirt that says drag is not a crime. And
yeah,
I was just thinking, it's like such a small gesture, and I was just thinking, anybody can do something to essentially protest this, all of these really fascist, draconian, hateful laws and things that are being pushed right now. And I thought the least we can do is make an episode about.
Oh my
topic,
God, yeah. The bar is literally so freaking low. Don Cheadle on his SNL bit, he wore a T-shirt that said "Protect Trans Kids."
Yeah,
and everybody said, "What a hero!" That should be something that is literally the least that we can do as a society is protect kids.
Awesome,
and we can't even do that much.
Yeah, just yesterday I saw that Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer of Tool, he wore drag for his show in Florida. Pretty cool.
Yeah,
great work, guys. I mean, I think of course, always, I think always I've been a supporter of LGBT things, as any right-thinking person is. But I think today, when you see how it is essentially let's say the front wedge, it's like the cutting edge of protest in society now. It's just existing as an LGBT or queer person. This is the most radical and revolutionary thing you can do to, let's say, push or champion democracy in America in 2023. And I don't know, have I just topped the most woke thing that we've said thus far? I don't know. But so anyway, it's, for me, I've come from a place of just being kind of generally supportive to actually being feeling this kind of inspiration that a lot of people talk about when they talk about trans people or drag or all these things. Whereas I've never been someone who watched Drag Race or something. I don't know about you. Did you ever watch Drag Race?
I never really did. I think we'll get into it when we talk about what drag is, but the performative femininity, whether it's male or female performers, femininity just isn't that interesting to me.
Yeah, and similar here. It's I don't care about fashion, I don't care about makeup, things like this. So in a similar way, it's just not a show that's for me, I guess,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm performing drag when I wear makeup. It's not even, femininity just it's not something that really resonates too much. I'm a cis woman, but, that whole I need to perform my femininity for a crowd, or I want to perform my femininity for a crowd, I could take it or leave it.
Yeah, and personally, I really wonder about the future of this whole concept of drag, just because our concepts of gender and binariness are evolving. And, even now they're starting to run into it, where it's like, can a trans person be a drag queen or drag king? It's a little complicated because they're not exactly crossing gender in this traditional sense, and different drag queens have different ideas about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very... drag itself is a performance of gender, and hypermasculinity or hyperfemininity. It's more commonly hyperfemininity, just because that is a more interesting show than hypermasculinity. But I would consider, like, professional wrestling. I consider that drag. That's a performance of hypermasculine behavior. It just doesn't.
I think it's a reasonable thing to say. I mean, I think I was listening to maybe it was How Did This Get Made or something like that. I think it was on a podcast, but they were saying how Vin Diesel, the action actor, they were saying he took a lot of his inspiration from drag and hung out with a lot of drag performers in the same sense of like, okay, I'm performing my gender, and to get this sense of an over-the-top gender performance. I think it's an interesting point, but I don't know, is it exactly what these words traditionally, what people were traditionally thinking about when they thought about drag. I think this is just a example of the evolution of it. This is a totally off tangent, but I just watched this video about what was it, man? It was like this K sound with a glottal stop. So it's it's like whenever you finish a word like think, and then you hear the K at the end. And it's something that, so as opposed, so I'll try to make it normally. Like, I think about it all the time, right? You don't hear a particularly strong K there. But if I say like, I think about it all the time, you hear that special pop. Which comes from like
that glottal stop.
It comes from closing off your vocal cords. But anyways, now as I'm recording this with you, because it tends to happen whenever you're really enunciating, so doing presentations, public speaking, and now I'm like driving myself crazy because I keep hearing myself doing it. It's like I catch it every time. It's really bothering me.
Unpopular opinion for a podcaster, but I'm actually a big fan of plosives.
Yeah, they're pretty good, I guess.
I find them very soothing to listen to.
I mean, some languages have these like strong plosives or glottal stops built in naturally. Some languages, it's like one of their consonant sounds.
Yeah.
But why are we talking about The Little Mermaid? And we're talking about drag. These seem like two totally
of Florida,
unrelated topics. Do you think they were off the coast of Florida? Could this be possible? Does The Little Mermaid take place in the Bermuda Triangle?
I mean, Disney is literally in Florida.
Doesn't it make sense? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. And then like Bermuda Triangle, it's a place where weird things happen, like magic.
You see a lot of manatees. Manatees were mistaken as mermaids.
Manatees are in Florida. Dang. So he's like the prince of Florida. He's like, is he the son of
ultimate Florida man?
Yeah. Marries a manatee. Florida man marries a manatee. Is he like the son of Jimmy Buffett? Or I'm trying to decide who.
Yet he falls in love with her anyway.
Who would be the prince of Florida? Guy Fieri's not from Florida, is he? He's from somewhere else, I think.
I think I want to say Jersey.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he looks like he belongs in either Florida or Jersey.
Yes, one of those.
Okay, so why are we talking about both drag and The Little Mermaid? What's the connection?
Well, the connection is divine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, oftentimes our ideas we come up with are pretty divine, if I say so myself.
No, Russell, I mean divine the drag queen.
I got my hand on my forehead now, like I'm in a Naruto cartoon. Yeah, so divine the drag queen. Okay, so she's in The Little Mermaid or something?
So a lot of people think that Ursula, the sea witch, who sings, in fact, "Poor unfortunate souls," a lot of people think that her design is based largely on Divine.
Yeah, and this
who
is
actually, Little Mermaid came out in '89. Divine, unfortunately, passed away in the March of '88. So. Well, he never saw The Little Mermaid. It was probably in production at a period where he was really, really popular as a performer.
Yeah, and this is pretty much confirmed. I was trying to find in my notes exactly where it said it, but basically I would say the development of Ursula was kind of passed around through a few different people. They were trying to decide what exactly she should look like, and again, there's that glottal stop again. This is like that movie Pi or the number 23. I'm just like driving myself insane. I've gone too deep into pronunciation YouTube videos. But so basically they had this pretty like generic looked like a lot of the other like evil Disney women, like a really thin, slender, tall look, like the Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent, etc.
Yeah.
And so even that in itself is kind of Cruella too, you're right. Yeah, even that itself is kind of a big breakthrough of this movie, is that for once you had a different kind of villain, you had a different body type acceptable in a movie, for a woman. Which is cool.
Yeah, which is great, and it's why it's why I think Ursula, as a villain, resonates so much with a lot of people. It's also because she's not like explicitly evil. She's a capitalist. She's a charlatan, but she's not like. But ultimately, she gives Ariel what she wants. She's just like a sleazy car salesman about it. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. And
yeah, we're all a little sleazy, let's be honest.
Sleazy, just a little bit.
I think these like literary critics and such, that they take a little bit of license with this, because she is obviously trying to trick Ariel. She was not really trying to help her, she intentionally becomes Vanessa just to prevent Ariel from getting the prince, Yeah,
like when they really mess with your credit at the sleazy car sales place. But ultimately, like, she doesn't kill puppies. She doesn't curse a baby. She makes a really bad deal with a kid who's too naive to know any different. And like, that's just American. Really, how many of us have like tens of thousands of dollars in student loans for the exact same reason?
Again, typical Florida behavior. It's just, you go to Florida, what do you expect? Yeah, so that's the connection here. So Ursula, the villain in the little...
Speaking of body type, Russ and I did figure out original Ursula, only 6 tentacles, guys.
Yeah. There she is on the screen, just 6. I guess some people say it's kind of Doc Ock logic, Doctor Octopus, where he's got 4 tentacles, but he's also got 4 human limbs. So technically Ursula's got the 2 arms, so it's like it's an 8, but it's definitely 8 like limbs. It's a poor man's 8 for sure.
Yeah. It's a poor man's 8. A Florida 8, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got Ursula based on the drag queen Divine, which we'll talk about a bit more about Divine, and basically, like, we had a few different people involved in this creation of Ursula. Like we said, originally she had kind of like a tall, thin look. Later on, she kind of had more of like this look like a puffer fish or something like that. She had spine. She looked like a manta ray for a little while. Ooh. As well. And so different people were just kind of doing sketches. And then they had, I'm looking here frantically to see who actually made the, Rob Minkoff, who I believe is kind of like one of the directors of Little Mermaid. Let's make sure. So he made this kind of sketch where she looked a little bit more like a kind of like a divine type here. And so he was the art director in the he's the director of the whole movie. Sorry guys.
Oh, okay.
There's so many people were involved in this, it was kind of hard to keep it straight who was who. And
yeah, no, it definitely, and again, it is based in an era of celebrating kind of queerness and queer coding, so it's difficult to keep anything straight with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, like, so Rob Minkoff himself is not LGBT or gay or anything like that, but a lot of other people who did work on the story were, in fact. So this was a kind of an interesting feature. Like, I find myself when researching The Little Mermaid thinking a lot about, like, in what ways was it kind of a good representation or a good kind of think piece for LGBT, let's say, progress in the world, and in what ways is it kind of, quote unquote problematic. So Little Mermaid came out in 1989. Interesting thing about it, Disney was really hesitant to make this because actually the movie Splash had just come out a few years before, which I never thought about. That's that, right. But it's like 80s was really the mermaid decade, I suppose. Like this one of these weird things where something just becomes trendy kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, like zombies in the 10s.
For sure. Yeah. And why didn't we get a zombie princess? I don't know.
We should. I feel cheated out of a zombie prince. Well, I mean, we got Corpse Bride.
Oh, that's true. That's pretty good. Not a Disney thing, but definitely fills that niche.
And Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. That's also true. Yeah. No, also, I don't think it's Disney, but yeah, it still definitely fills that spot in our heart for sure.
Definitely.
And two things Little Mermaid is kind of, let's say, noted for is one, it just kind of revived Disney itself, right? So Disney was really struggling at this point. They didn't have so many successes, and Disney, Little Mermaid was such a huge success that it kind of like revived their whole cartoon movie industry. It won 2 Academy Awards, and generally here, this was like their first movie of what probably we both grew up in, was this like life of, watching Disney musicals, seeing new ones come out every couple years or so.
Yeah, it's really difficult for me to picture a struggling Disney corporation.
Yeah, but there was a time for sure before they owned everything.
They bought Star Wars, they bought Marvel, they bought National Geographic.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, gee whiz. So Ariel was really...
She did it.
She's the one.
Yeah, she did it. Yeah, and I mean, with the legal battles that are coming, we can only assume soon they will buy Florida itself,
Disney, buy your enemies.
Another kind of funny little, let's say, factoid or detail. So the songwriter and, let's say, musical, composer for this, they were the same ones for Little Shop of Horrors, actually. Is that amazing?
Really?
Yeah, also really incredible, movie and slash play.
Very catchy, very good lyricists.
And one of the first things they contributed, is just a little funny detail, is they had this minor character, a crab named Clarence, and he was kind of like a little English butler type, And so Howard Ashman, the songwriter, he made the suggestion of making him Jamaican instead, and then essentially reimagining the musical style of the whole thing to be kind of more Caribbean feeling, you know?
I see.
So he is saying,
I always wondered about that as a choice.
So he is saying, no, this is a Sebastian, and even though we're in Florida, everything's going to be Jamaican. Which,
very far off the coast of Florida.
Which, news to me that Sebastian is a crab. Did you know this? Am I the only one who's surprised by this?
Well, yeah, because he's credited as Sebastian the Crab.
Does he not look like a lobster? I mean,
he looks
how is he a
nothing
crab?
like anything. He has a shell. Lobsters don't have that weird head poking out.
That's a good point.
He looks like a snail with legs.
He's like a weird little homunculus, essentially.
Yeah, he looks like... And have you seen... Do you know where a crab's mouth is? Have you seen a crab
Roughly.
eat? It's not with their face.
That's pretty true. Yeah, they kind of had this like chest mouth type thing going on, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
I think surely Sebastian is like a previous victim of Ursula. He made some kind of deal, you know.
Oh boy. Well, he did decide to come under to sea. Maybe he was a human who just wanted to hang out down where it's wetter.
Yeah, who wouldn't? Down where it's
Right.
wetter, best bring a sweater, down by the sea. I think that's how it goes. By the way, did you see you saw the, what's her name? Melissa McCarthy, is that right?
Melissa McCarthy.
I got it. Yeah. You saw her performance?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. I think it's definitely inspired by Pat Carroll. And also that I think she made a conscious decision to mimic Divine. Because if you look at that performance, like she makes the same face that Divine makes in a lot of his bit pieces and comedy roles.
Yeah, I thought it's kind of meh, but honestly, all the live action Disney stuff besides Jungle Book, I guess, it's hard to live up to a cartoon. Yeah, it's like they can be animated in their face and body in a way that it's very difficult for a human being.
Why would you go with something that's more limiting?
Yeah, exactly. Which I think Disney knows this good and well too. I think they're like, we're gonna make these movies that are objectively worse, but it's a way to make some more money. So I don't think they care. And honestly, like sometimes it's nice, like Aladdin, much worse movie than the animated one, of course, but it was cool. It's nice to see it. You know?
Indulge in nostalgia every now and then.
Yeah. But again, like...
yeah, Disney definitely knows what they're doing.
Yeah, probably the most like glaring thing with Aladdin too is like the villain was so much less, impactful, so much less inspiring, the Jafar
I barely remember Jafar.
He had this really soft voice. He was doing this really strange performance. Nothing like the cartoon Jafar at all. It's really interesting.
Which cartoon Jafar was queer coded in a very different way, I think.
Yeah. Queer coding. So obviously, Ursula's a funny one because I don't know. Do people think of her as queer coded in the same way? I mean, I think it's news to most people that she's like based on a drag queen in that way. It's certainly not something they market.
Right.
I mean, do you remember when did you first hear about this little like pop fact that Ursula was based on a drag queen?
So I was raised in a house where my parents started taking us to pride festivals when we were in the strollers. So this is a pop fact that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm. And is it like, do you feel like the queer community and drag performers, do you feel like Ursula's like a hero for them? Or do you feel like it's like a kind of grotesque thing that they kind of hate because it's not exactly the most flattering, portrayal?
No, and there's a couple of different schools. Like the older queer people that I know are more celebratory of Ursula and more like that was how my first introduction to butch lesbians, or because ultimately butch lesbians that I know tend to identify with Ursula quite a lot. And not so much. I don't know a whole lot of drag queens. I have seen drag queens on like TikTok or YouTube that are more celebratory of the whole divine connection and body positivity connection, because that's what a lot of modern drag is. It's not just self-acceptance.
Right.
It's also
and they're certainly not like
part of it is
playing villains. It's like
yeah.
They're not meant to be evil. But I think even you talked about wrestling earlier. How many times are we gonna reference Goldust, that wrestler we saw that one time in the Attitude Era wrestling podcast? But man, he really made a big impression. But again, it's like I think that in many, let's say, stages, many scenarios, many contexts, it's like that's kind of the only place for them. So even drag kind of has this interesting history of villainy in that same way. I saw this quote.
Tell me.
I saw this quote. "It is really heavy for a kid to only exist as a villain or a joke in an animated series," which, pretty straightforward quote. And then I saw this was from Rebecca Sugar, and suddenly I thought, oh man, genius.
Oh, it always comes back. I love Steven Universe. Oh my goodness. But yeah, it's definitely because a lot of the villains were queer coded, and the only time that you ever saw yourself was in queer coded characters, and those are only villains. It makes sense that a lot of older queer folks identify more with the villains. It's probably, objectively, Ursula is objectively, Cruella de Vil is the absolute worst human being that has ever existed. Why would there be enough demand to make a live action movie for it?
Do you think of her as queer coded as well?
I do. Mostly because she's financially taking care of herself. She's professionally taking care of herself.
And she's unmarried.
She doesn't
she's
have
like a single
partner.
Woman. Yeah. It's a good point.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fast. That's a very good point.
And she's really only interested, the only, human interaction that she's interested other than her lackeys is her best female friend, and she rips on her husband all the time.
Oh, yeah. Huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Very compelling point. The wild thing is this seems to come back to the Hays Code. Do you know about this? This is like in Hollywood, the kind of morality code where movies had to conform to, they couldn't be too dirty or too immoral or and so it, I hear that there was a time in Hollywood before the Hays Code where actually like things were pretty extreme. Like there was like, sex and like immorality and these kind of portrayals of very bad people and so on, which I've never seen any of these really early movies, but it's interesting to think about because I think we just generally think old-fashioned early stuff was super, super moral. But when you think about it, books weren't
conservative.
Books weren't conservative.
Yeah.
And movies are just books that you can see visually. But anyways, so there was a point around, I think
do have thoughts on that, actually.
Let's hear your thoughts.
And it does sort of come back to drag a little bit. I think that the forefront of any sort of technology is going to be artists.
Yeah.
And artists just by nature are provocative.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see it.
And if you get there before the police do, then you better, do your thing as quickly as you can with as much gusto as you can, because chances are they're going to come in and police it.
Yeah, you kind of make a new space for yourself that's still free and open in order to express yourself.
Before the Hays Code, before there was like any kind of standards in cinema, or like nationalized standards in cinema, it was a Wild West. There were no regulations. There was no policing.
Yeah, so the Hays Code came up in like 1934 and it lasted until 1968. And so not only did it say, don't show a bunch of sex and stuff on the films, it also just generally said, things have to end in a moral way. The villain cannot win, stuff like this. And they also just generally said like positive portrayals of homosexual characters were not allowed. So like if you were showing someone who seemed to be like they might be homosexual or have some of those tendencies, well, obviously they can't succeed because homosexuality is a sin, according to the people who made this thing. But the effect that this had...
that's really messed up.
It's pretty messed up, I think, obviously. But the effect that this had was if you're, let's say, an actor, or if you were a writer making a story, if you want to present some gay characters or whatever, well, they have to be the villains in the thing. So this was not only a thing that made... that made people like legally have to demonize homosexuality. This is also weirdly a thing that made opportunities for homosexuals to act like homosexuals, or not just homosexuals, obviously queer people, drag people, whatever. Which is also, I think, a really fascinating side of it, where it's like this at the same time kind of gave them a space, gave them an opportunity to, be very, let's say, flamboyant, be very performatively queer in a way that was totally acceptable, because that's kind of heel behavior, that's classic, like, heel behavior. Yeah. But again, coming back to Rebecca Sugar's point, it's kind of messed up for a kid whenever that's what you're watching,
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
But some other examples that came up when I was looking into particularly Disney's, tendency to queer code all their villains. So in Pocahontas, Governor Ratcliffe, he was the only male character to have makeup. He had braided hair and bows. He wore pink. Scar.
A pug and a person who attended to his every whim, who was very, very obviously in love with him.
Yeah, and some people say it's similar story with Gaston and his little buddy in Beauty and the Beast, which I think they played up in the live action one, which I don't know. I didn't really didn't register with me.
LeFou, I think, was like explicitly.
Yes,
queer
he was explicitly queer. Like he was identifying as queer, at least to himself. Gaston, I think, to me, it felt like they were trying to imply that he was probably like a closeted homosexual. I thought.
Yeah. I feel like a lot that's sort of a trope whenever somebody's like overly performatively masculine. It's kind of a trope to be like, oh, you're compensating for the fact that you're gay.
Yeah.
But really, masculinity, femininity it's not related to sexuality nearly as much as people think it is.
Yeah, these are all old-fashioned ideas at this point. Anyway, so Scar in The Lion King, which I think for the most part with Scar, it's just kind of the way he speaks, like he has this kind of lilting sort of mannered way of speaking and kind of body language. But I definitely got that read when I was a kid too,
Yeah, he has very slinky body language.
That's true.
But I always read that as like sneaky rather than as gay.
I think even there was, I didn't do the research specific on this because we're not talking about Scar, but I remember there's this weird thing where he makes a reference to another movie that the actor was in, and in this other movie, the actor was like kind of queer coded, which I was like, okay, this is kind of a proof, but maybe I should have looked that up because that's kind of an interesting thing. We'll see. Yeah. Captain Hook in Peter Pan, which I don't know about this one. What is queer about Captain Hook? I have no idea. I don't even know when was the last time I saw this.
Yeah. And Peter Pan is one of those movies that 2023 watch makes it very, very problematic, racist, sexist, a whole bunch of not so great attitudes about gender and race and sexuality. Captain Hook was queer coded in that he had the lackey that was for some reason in love with him, but also he was very fashionable, had very big hair, beautiful hats and coats.
Yeah, I remember he had kind of frilly, there's some frilly element to his costume. Which, when did frills become gay? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, frills were like the height of masculine beauty in the 1700s. What are you even talking about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. And then people said also Barbossa in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Again, I didn't notice. I don't know. Maybe I don't have such good like gaydar to notice queer coding. I don't know.
Yeah, that one I don't see so much. I think the only real evidence for that is more interested in apples than in women, but that's like ace energy.
I don't remember that either, but yeah, this sounds right. And then for me, I as we mentioned, also Jafar, I think. Just again, kind of just generally he has this kind of like effete quality to his mannerisms and speaking that just tend to seem to be intentional.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always forget that effete is a word.
Yeah. I think it's a word people have directed at me fairly often, so I remember.
Oh, no. I don't know about that.
I also read someone said Tom and Jerry, not that it's Disney, but I just thought that was really interesting. I mean, like, obviously Bugs Bunny, classic cross-dresser. I don't know if we could go as far as
keep a gender on that bunny.
Call him a drag queen. But I saw these really weird arguments that Tom and Jerry, it's actually kind of like they're in love with each other or something, which I don't know.
I think that's like a popular trope whenever there's enemies is, they must be secretly in love with each other, but you can only make so many episodes until you start to veer off into that territory, and there were lots and lots and lots of Tom and Jerry episodes.
Yeah, it's really true. Not really related, but I was just thinking because I'm scrolling through here, I was like, okay, Hercules, maybe the villain, or maybe Hercules himself, you know?
Oh, Hades. Yeah, Hades was queer-coded for sure.
Yeah, but then I was also thinking, well, probably also like kind of, what would you call it? Jew-coded, you know? It's like, I think that's the other thing, you know? It's like there's this problematic tendency to make villains kind of gay. There's also this problematic tendency to make them kind of Jewish. You know?
Yeah.
In cartoons.
Yeah, it can get real darn problematic, I should say.
Yeah. So, finally talking about kind of villainy and drag, this kind of thing, you know, I think for Ursula, they seem to have picked maybe like the roughest, most like, just kind of deranged drag queen possibly.
Yes.
Possibly ever.
Oh my God.
You know? I don't think it was intentional. To me, it seems like they may have even seen Hairspray, and that led them to think about it. This was news from me, so of course, sorry to jump ahead so much, but we're talking about Divine, the drag persona of Harris Glenn Milstead, and probably his most mainstream, besides the Pink Flamingos thing, which we'll talk about, is he played the mother of the protagonist in Hairspray. And
Edna Turnblad.
Yeah, and this was news to me, and also it was news to me that this is why always they have a man play this role. They cross gender the role.
Oh,
and so this was why, of course,
I didn't realize that Divine was the reason.
Yeah. So this is the first one, you know. So after that, they just kept doing it, and you know, because you know, in the movie version. Like the one I was exposed to as the movie, this was John Travolta playing this part, you know? Yeah,
that was the first time I saw Hairspray as well. And it's really sad because Divine, he liked the stage name Divine, although he did use he/him pronouns. He was the sort of drag queen that does it for not so much the enjoyment, but for the money. He used to say that the best part of drag was taking it off.
Yeah, I found this, I feel skeptical about it. Of course, you kind of have to take people for their words, so we have to assume he was being honest about it, but just judging by his general behavior in life, I don't know if I really buy it, you know? Like, he seemed to throw these lavish parties where he was Divine. He, of course, performed a lot as Divine, and I don't know. To me, I think that probably he got something out of this. I mean, I think he was probably a person with some struggles, and I think maybe happiness was just kind of a hard thing for him to attain, you know.
And it's something his manager said that he had never seen him happier than in the month leading up to his death, because he was finally getting professional success, and he was getting recognized as a male actor, which is something that he'd always wanted. And he died the night before he was scheduled to do a spot role on Married with Children. He literally the night that he died, he had just done dinner after rehearsing for that role he was supposed to shoot the next day, and it was going to be a really big breakout role for him. But he'd always wanted to be known as a male actor. It was his relationship with John Waters and the Dreamlander crew that sort of solidified his drag persona of Divine. And anything that John Waters is involved in tends to be a little bit over the top. John Waters at this period in his life was sort of obsessed with creating the filthiest film that had ever existed, and that's where we get Pink Flamingos. Yeah,
and there was before we talk about Pink Flamingos, there's like this, the first one, I think, I was trying to find the name of it again real quick. And I'll also say while I'm kind of trying to search here, I believe it's that one. That John Waters, he also kind of had this description of Divine that he had no desire to be a woman or to pass as a woman. He was trying to be like a monster. He was trying to like scare people, to be like a Godzilla figure, something like this.
Yeah, the Godzilla of drag.
Again, at the same time, Divine also seemed to really enjoy, makeup and cosmetology. He worked as a hairdresser for many years.
Yeah.
He seemed to enjoy this job, and so I don't know. Again, I think it's probably a little more complicated than to say that he did not actually want to be doing drag, wanted to be, a man, perform as a man the whole time.
It was somewhat complicated, especially from the relationship that he had with his family. After his family discovered Pink Flamingos, for example, they were so revolted that they moved to Florida and didn't speak to him for 9 years.
And probably this is... they were there in Florida, and they talked to the creators of Little Mermaid about something.
The Florida connection keeps getting stronger, you guys. This is the Florida episode.
So I think it was... And the thing about this John Waters movies, and I don't know about Pink Flamingo, so I'm about to learn, but they were just separate to any like LGBT, conservative outrage or anything. They were just really gross. Like, I think it's Eat Your Makeup, but I'm not really sure. It was one of the early ones.
Yeah, that was one of them.
They were essentially, it was all about these friends trying to compete to show who is the most disgusting. And the last scene is like, John Waters, he followed this dog around until the dog took a poop, and then Divine picked up the poop and ate it.
Yeah, that was Pink Flamingos.
That was Pink Flamingos, wow.
Yeah, that was Pink Flamingos, and it's worth noting, it was not Divine's idea to do this. John Waters, actually, when he first suggested this, Divine thought that he was joking, and it wasn't until the day that they started filming that scene that he learned, oh no, this man is not joking. This is not going to be a plastic turd. So I understand... So when I read the synopsis of Pink Flamingos, because I didn't see the movie, I have, we discussed at the top, I'm asexual, I'm also sex repulsed. I just, sex is not something that I identify with, which is a reason that I'm often not welcome in really queer spaces that celebrate sexuality, and I completely understand that. This is one of those areas. I had to take like 3 running goes at the synopsis without gagging. It involves a lot of scatology. It involves cannibalism, sexual assault, incest, voyeurism. Pretty much every single vile thing that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Like, I was joking, this movie really should have just been called The Aristocrats. Yeah.
Yeah, Aristocats would have been a way different movie if they had based those characters.
Another Disney connection. But it was like an exercise in poor taste, is how John Waters describes it. He wanted to really... It's about these two rivals here that Divine's character is the filthiest person alive, and they want to prove that they're the filthiest people alive. Ultimately, Divine ends up giving a blowjob to her son. The furniture gets cursed. A guy gets emasculated to death by people that he was keeping in the basement so that he could rape and sell the babies to lesbian couples to adopt. Like, it was a really, really fucked up movie. So, in fairness, if that is your only reference to drag culture, I would understand if you didn't think that drag was for kids. That's not what drag culture is.
No, it's pretty separate.
John Waters. Yeah. That's what John Waters is.
I think we can all agree John Waters is not for kids. I mean, maybe someone would disagree. I don't know. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah. And it's a completely separate thing. My parents actually... I told you I grew up going to these pride rallies. My parents just recently went to a protest just outside of our city where there were some right-wingers that didn't think that drag story time should be a thing in their city. And fortunately, the counter-protesters outnumbered the protesters something like 75-1.
Wow.
It was an absolute blowout. But speaking of the Florida connection, the NAACP just recently announced that Florida has a travel warning now by the NAACP because it's explicitly hostile to queer people.
Yeah, sure. Not surprising. I mean, it's like you really want to see a lot of... Yeah, it's sad to see that a lot of the pride parades there are canceled and everything, because you really want to see like a lot of protest type stuff happen. You want to see them kind of fight, but it's very understandable because like the odds of there being just a mass shooting during a pride parade in Florida are extremely high. Extremely high,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I understand. I understand why people would avoid creating this confrontation,
And, I haven't talked too much about it, but I do have a loved one down in Florida who's going to be visiting up in the end of June. This person is a genderqueer lesbian. We don't know if they're going to feel safe going back down. Yeah. So it sucks that there's... Unfortunately, it's not something that's a stranger to, say, the Black community or a lot of POC communities, but there's a whole bunch of people that, have to feel like refugees in their own country, and I think that sucks.
Yeah, and I don't know if people realize like how real these things are, or oftentimes, as we did with the abortion topic when we did the episode about that, it's like we're looking back to the late 80s, early 90s, where there were problems, of course, but everything was in such a frozen stasis that either the problems didn't affect you at all, or you just were able to not think about it. It's like either, but now it's to the state where the existence of drag rights, trans rights, LGBT, etc. It's like this is kind of the only thing separating us from like a fascist religious state, which is really upsetting.
We'll get into it a little bit during the Eurovision segment, but I was very, very excited to see how extremely gay this year's show was. And like during the whole Parade of Nations, when everybody came out with their flags, The Italian performer brought out the Italian flag, but also the intersectional pride flag.
Great.
So it's heartening to see that, nobody is going to be forced back into the closet if we can help it. And I think that would be a kind of cool segue into talking a little bit about the original drag queen, William Dorsey.
Yeah. We for sure have to start talking about drag itself. Let's discuss the etymology of the word first, and then we'll talk about the kind of, let's say, origins and history of it. So drag, just as a word generally, meaning like to kind of pull something or to pull something where it's kind of rubbing across something. This came from words like in English dragon, but spelled differently draggen in the late 14th century, which meant to draw a grapnel across the bottom of a lake. And by grapnel here, they mean kind of like a hook or an anchor, right? So the sense of like dragging something across the bottom of a body of water in order to try to hook something, like maybe you're trying to search for an object that was down there or something. Really specific
like
meaning.
Fishing.
Yeah. Fishing for junk, perhaps, or fishing for actual fish. I don't know. And this generally going all the way back to the Norse, to the Proto-Germanic, always having a form something like draga or draganon or something, all the way back to the Proto-Indo-European, where it was something like drek, just generally meant to draw or pull something across the ground.
Do you think that this has onomatopoetical roots?
That's a great idea. Yeah, kind of the sounds kind of like a vibrating ground sound. I love it. Yeah, very much could, for sure. There's also an argument that it's connected to the Latin word trahere, trahere, meaning to pull something in the same way. But they're not too sure. But it's an interesting connection because, of course, tractor comes from this as well. And, of course, in our Eurovision song, we have a song about a tractor as well, So
I love it when things connect.
Depending on how kind of conservative you are about it, we know for sure that this word drag, these are the same roots as like draft, like a draft of a liquid, a beer or whatever, draft beer, whatever. Not too surprising there. I was interesting to see that draw comes from this, and not just draw as into pull or draw up a rope or something, but even to draw as into create an image, because of course you're dragging the pencil or pen across the page to draw something.
That's
very
really
cool,
interesting.
right? And then if it connects to this kind of tract or trahere Latin root, then we have a ton from there. So words like abstract, meaning drawn from something, away from something, let's say. Attract, meaning to pull something toward. Contract, meaning to get kind of drawn or pulled together. Words like train, track, trail, tractor, retreat, distract, meaning to kind of pull someone away from what they're looking at, etc. Right, all coming from this same root.
Oh my goodness.
Pretty cool.
That's really, really cool.
So, how does this word meaning to drag something, to kind of pull something across something, how does it come to mean to wear the clothing of the opposing gender?
Because you're going to have to drag me off the dance floor.
Yeah, maybe it's that, yeah. So there's kind of like, well, one kind of really big accepted meaning for it, or meaning origin for it. And of course, this is coming back to theater, in which in Shakespearean times specifically, even though it happened earlier, but mainly in Shakespearean times, of course, women were not allowed to perform in plays because women were thought they should be, kind of more private and not so, let's say, I don't know, in the public. They thought it was inappropriate. So, of course,
women are famously bad actors.
I wasn't going to say. I mean, look at Melissa McCarthy's performance. Come on. But the Shakespeare, of course, all of the women's parts were played by men. And there's this claim that they would talk about this as being in drag because they would wear these long dresses, long skirts that would drag across the floor, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to say it. It makes me wonder why drag wouldn't have emerged talking about also women in women's clothes.
What do you mean?
Because you have the same kind of thing going on, right? Is the fabric is going to be dragging on the floor
either way? Yeah, I guess it's true. Maybe as a woman, you're wearing those clothes for real, so you're probably not wearing clothes that are gonna go past your feet. Because then once you go out in the street, they're gonna get really dirty. You know. I guess these men were probably putting on clothes that were not necessarily tailored specifically for them, but they're just walking across the stage, so it doesn't matter quite so much. Maybe it's that.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So this word drag and this general culture that it came out of was a kind of a slang used mostly in Britain around this time. So this was like 1870 or so, called Polari. And Polari, coming from the Italian word parlare, meaning to talk, like parlar, you know. Parlance is another word we kind of get from this.
Do we know what era this was?
Again, around 1870, so like late 19th century. Could have been as far back as the 16th century as well.
Okay.
And this was used in Britain mostly by actors, circus performers, wrestlers, merchant sailors, criminals, sex workers, and gay people, the gay subculture as well. And generally, this was used as a kind of a argot, like argot meaning these sort of secret languages or intentionally not understandable languages. And it was basically built from a mixture of English, of course, also Italian, and also Romani or Romani, depending on how you like to pronounce it. Right. And so a lot of the words came from Italian and Romani. So this was basically for different reasons, but a lot of it was like you had a culture where maybe you were a criminal, maybe you were gay, maybe you were doing some kind of sex work, or maybe you were just sort of associated with those people who do those things. And so you generally wanted ways to talk about things that not everyone would catch on to, you know?
Right.
Now,
little subtleties.
Now, what other words do we get from here? We do have a few others that are still kind of like around and kind of known. One is in the UK, they have this word naff, meaning that something is bad, right? So that's naff or don't be naff, something like this. Another one that we're very familiar with, zhuzh. This actually comes from Polari. So it's interesting that it also, of course, was kind of repopularized in drag culture and queer culture.
Yeah. You know. Do we yet know how it's spelled?
They have it spelled here ZHOOSH. So that's their idea of how they'd like to spell it. Where does it come from? This comes from a Romani word, zhujo, meaning clean or neat. So in its original sense, it meant like something was kind of cleaned up, almost like to spruce it up, right?
Mm-hmm. Almost like it's dusted.
For sure. Another word that we're still pretty familiar with today is butch, meaning like a kind of manly woman or a manly gay person, something like that.
Sure.
Fruit for a gay man seems to come from Polari as well.
Really?
I like this one, manky, meaning like dirty or worthless. This comes from Polari as well.
That makes sense.
This is from a Italian word mancare, meaning to be lacking in something. So that's one. That's kind of when you first look up drag origins, you find this, and you can find the connection to Polari. But I want to talk about a couple other sort of possible roots. I get this feeling like generally, when we talk about etymology, linguistics, things don't necessarily have just one root. We see a lot of things where things converge or there's multiple influences. So one here, there's like a Yiddish word, tragen, coming from a German word like tragen or tragen, whatever. And this is just a word for wear something. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So they thought it kind of came from this, right? So just as in, we have this word cross-dress where you don't have any specific sense in cross-dress to the fact that you're looking like a woman. It's very possible in drag too. It's just kind of a way of saying he put it on, something like that, right? A more vague.
I think I almost buy that more.
Yeah, it's kind of like a more euphemistic sense. Finally, one other thing. So there were these masquerade balls in around the same time, actually, which were referred to as the Grand Rag. And in this case, of course, rag here was associated with the clothes they would wear, but is also from possibly a phrase, interesting little idiom here, tag, rag, and bobtail, which just kind of meant the rabble, the common people. I don't know why. I didn't find the answer to that. Rag was considered to be the social underclass as well. And so something like a fancy rag ball was this idea that, these were kind of more normal people, more like proletariats, and I suppose, but kind of getting dressed up in their finest clothes. And they're making fun of them a little bit by calling this like a grand rag, right?
And if you don't pause for your glottal stop, you kind of drag those two words together and make it grand drag.
Exactly. So you get grand drag. And then the queen of this would, of course, be the drag queen, right? Interestingly, this is also the similar root to ragtime, this style of music.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to ask about that.
So ragtime was the kind of music that you might hear at one of these fancy rag balls, right?
That makes sense to me.
So speaking of these like grand rag balls, this is of course kind of really, really tied into the history of drag queen as a concept, yeah?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And I think that goes back to, we hinted a little bit about this, William Dorsey Swann, the United States' first drag queen.
Yeah, exactly. First to self-identify as a drag queen, even queen of drag. He called himself. Really incredible. I mean, again, coming back to this whole idea of like drag and just queer living is such a powerful protest, no matter what your specific politics are, just this general act of, fighting power. It's crazy to what extent just dressing as a woman, achieves this on weirdly the highest possible level,
Absolutely.
So what do we?
And this and every month, I think that it's really important to remember that the parents of queer resistance and like queer activism in the United States, a lot of them are Black and POC. Like William Dorsey Swann was born as an enslaved person in 1860.
Yeah.
Like this is the roots. The roots of queer culture in America are, in oppressed people. And the more that we whitewash it, the more I think we lose as a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like a lot of the attendees of these drag balls that Swann would organize were also formerly enslaved peoples as well. Yeah, and I think that he hosted drag balls throughout the 80s and 90s in Washington D.C. and a lot of these were like meant to be celebrations about freedom and most notably it was his 30th birthday bash, which was actually seen as the birth of violent resistance in queer activism, because his parties got broken up by law enforcement quite a lot, as you can imagine. Yeah. And it's like, whether you talk about, queer and LGBT culture and rights, or you talk about race rights, it's like many people don't want to believe in the narrative, which is true, which is that, these are really the kind of two defining through lines of American history. It's like a racial oppression and struggle for civil rights, and gay, LGBT, and queer struggle for civil rights as well. Even from such an early time, it's so like mind blowing to me to think about being a slave and then being a free person, probably who's still struggling to how do you live in a world where before you were property and now you're probably unemployable, probably still essentially treated like a slave, and then to also think about your identity and expression at the same time. It's unimaginable.
Well, I think it's very interesting to note that because these events were just by nature so secretive, a lot of these invitations to these grand drags would be given at the YMCA. And I just think that that's an interesting through line. Like,
very
the YMCA has always been gay.
Yeah. There's also a lot of like kind of Maryland and Northeast United States weird through lines too. I believe that Swan was from Maryland originally. Of course, he moved to Washington D.C. Divine as well. Lived and
she's
grew up
Baltimore girl
in Maryland. Also.
Or he's a Baltimore guy, isn't he?
Yeah. Hancock, Maryland for Swan. And there's something else too, but I forgot now. Something about the directors of Little Mermaid, I think, also.
Yeah. Which, we didn't get into it, but Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen, also a really, really important moment for, the queer community. I think The Little Mermaid is one of these stories that gets retold with new cultural context every couple of decades.
Could be true.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that means something different, and it always, almost always, means something akin to liberation and, being honest with yourself.
Yeah, so a lot of people see the movie as like problematic because, of course, she loses her voice. She essentially trades everything for a man, and so on. And of course, this man loves her, even though he basically doesn't know her at all because he can't talk to her or whatever. But
real Florida man move.
I think you can read into this kind of, almost like satirical kinds of pointing out the problems with gender relations, so on. But the original story, pretty similar in many ways, but different in others. So in a similar way, and I'll say Hans Christian Andersen, he wrote this story in 1837. So interestingly, when you think about it, not that far from the other things we've been talking about, even from from William Dorsey Swan's life and experiences. Not that he was likely to have read this, I don't know, but so as a gay man,
I think he might have done.
He was kind of basing this or drawing inspiration from, I'm gonna say it's pronounced like Undine, this like really ancient mermaid tale, which I think was French. But
if it's French, it's Undine.
Undine, okay, that'll work for me too. I'll buy it. So Hans Christian Andersen, similar story. She meets a sea witch who's a more minor character, not named at all, to try to become a human. And the sea witch gives her a potion that gives her legs in exchange for her voice. But her idea was like to get a soul. Actually, she was trying to gain her soul rather than just to get the man she was in love with. But the way that she could get a soul was to marry a prince.
Yeah. And a lot of the ways that Hans Christian Andersen, because he was homosexual, and a lot of scholars agree that this was written as like a love letter to a man that he was in love with and never could be with because they just didn't
well,
match up sexually.
Yeah, exactly. So Edward Cullen, who was not himself homosexual as far as we know.
Right.
And yeah, so anyways, the ending is the main difference because in the Little Mermaid as the story, the Little Mermaid does not marry the prince. The prince marries another human. And, you know, a lot of people read this as an expression of Hans Christian Andersen's frustration in not being able to, you know, fit into the role that he would need in order to be with the man that he loved, Edward Cullen.
Yes.
You know?
And it's worth kind of noting that in the original story, whenever the Little Mermaid would take a step on her legs, it caused incredible pain because it wasn't something that came natural to her.
Yeah. So a sense of she was like, it was like she was walking on sharp knives anytime that she walked. Yeah.
And I've never had to deal with gender dysphoria. I imagine that having to walk in the shoes of somebody that you aren't truly, I imagine that is a very painful experience.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know, it's a fascinating thing because I think like if you were to construct a story today to be, let's say, very LGBT supportive, very feminism supportive, this is not the story you'd make. And it'll be interesting to see what will the changes be to the new movie, you know.
And that's the other frustrating thing about podcasting is by the time this comes out, the movie will have been out for a month.
You'll have seen it, and everyone will be saying, why are they talking about that awful movie? Or like, on the other hand, why are they talking about this movie that's actually the best thing ever made? Who knows?
Because those are the only two options. In fairness, Daveed Diggs is in it, and he's Sebastian, and I think that he's just the tops.
Yeah, first, I don't know who that is, and second, I looked at Sebastian, and he just looks like a normal crab. He does not have a weird homunculus, creepy head made of bubble gum,
which is almost more disturbing because I don't see any facial expressions.
Yeah, he can't emote.
That's another limiting thing about the real life kind of looking animation is the fish. They are very weird looking when they don't have facial expressions and very emotional voices. Yeah, and yet still, it's definitely worse. Again, like Melissa McCarthy, definitely worse than seeing this, you know, one of the most animated villains of all time, like moving around and shaking and contorting, incredible with both. Yeah, it's like, it's such like a celebration of both the kind of octopus animation that they were able to do, where they actually kind of like, essentially they had footage of a real octopus and they just kind of traced and overlaid there to make their drawings. It's really crazy what they did. And then also kind of like using a plus size body to full effect as well. A celebration of this. Really cool. And then you see Melissa McCarthy. Of course, she's a real person. She can't do. But anyway, these movies, they're almost like, I love them as like a companion to the original, just because it's so crazy to see things made real, even if they're worse. I just don't mind it. You know, Aladdin was probably my favorite Disney movie, and it was just cool to see, especially like the street scene where he's jumping around and running from the guards. Yeah. It's just cool to see it as a real thing, even if it's not as good. Just nice. Yeah. I guess seeing cheesy special effects and cheesy sort of, because animation doesn't age too horribly, but you know, special effects and choreography, the science moving so quickly that you know, you look back at Lord of the Rings and you know, even though Gollum was like this revolutionary creature, and he still kind of, for the most part, holds up. You'll come up against a couple of scenes every now and then, and you're like, oh, well, that's kind of goofy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like you wonder, like, in 2023, would they be able to make Will Smith weirdly thick in a way that isn't just really off-putting to look at? But speaking of cheesiness,
Yeah.
in addition to talking about music, talking about etymology, we also talk about a third thing, but I can't remember what it was. Do you know?
It's Eurovision.
Eurovision. Bow, bow, bow.
And this is the this is the first recording that we're doing since the show.
This is, and that means this is the first one where we really truly, like, knowing what all the songs were, we picked, okay, what song do we want to do? And it's very interesting that this is the first one that we chose, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This time we went with which one, Russell?
Well, it's Croatia. I think the band must be called, like, Let 3. Is that how they say it?
I believe that's how they say it. I don't know what the Croatian word for 3 is, but it's probably something clever or a pun, just judging by the band's style.
And then, actually, I have no idea how to say the song name either, because I see it's Mama and then SC with some kind of accent marks.
Yeah, they've got the accent. Okay, so accent grave, circumflex. They both have accent circumflex on S and C. It's pronounced sha, and they say that sha.
Sha.
Sha. Yeah.
Okay.
They say this during a couple of times during the song. Mama kissed a psychopath. Sha. Mama kissed a psychopath.
I intuitively assume this is like a sound of disgust, almost like a pta kind of thing.
And that's a very good point. The band has given several different explanations of this.
Oh, so this isn't like an existing part of Croatian slang or something? Or maybe
no, it's actually it's not Croatian slang. It actually, the most compelling reason that I've heard, and you know, it varies. The band likes to fuck with people, so sometimes they'll say, "Oh, it's the sound that somebody makes when they have an orgasm." Oh, it's the sound that somebody makes when they're meditating. But the most compelling reason that I've heard is that it is it's a Russian letter. Sha is a Russian letter. It looks like a W with a little tail.
Okay.
And the reasoning that they gave is that when Armageddon comes, it's going to be coming with a bomb that has the letter Sha on it. This is an anti-war song. It's almost explicitly anti-Putin. It does not say Putin. It says everything but Putin. Because Eurovision has this tradition of being anti-political, or just like a safe space from like political arguments, basically. Which is why it was so surprising that Croatia was the first entry in the first semifinal to make it through to the final. I found that very, very surprising.
Yeah, I thought for sure they were gonna go home after the first day, but people liked it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, it's like, it's one thing to be political about other countries that are, you know, your neighbors in Eurovision, but I don't think they're taking a big risk in, you know, making a song villainizing Russia. You know, I think that's something everyone can get behind, except for some Americans, you know.
For context, the Eurovision ought to have been held in Ukraine this year because Ukraine won last year, but due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they were unable to host.
Yeah.
It took place in Liverpool this year instead. So this song, I wanted to talk about it at the same time that we were talking about drag, because it's a different form of drag, I think. And it's the form of drag that is explicitly political. It's done as a political message. This is a song that's extremely anti-war. The lyrics refer to... well, not in so many words, but they refer to Putin and the dictator of Belarus, Lukashenko, as psychopaths. Mama Kissed a Psychopath. You referenced the tractor earlier on. That is Lukashenko actually gifted Vladimir Putin a tractor for his 70th birthday.
It does seem like the sort of thing Putin would enjoy. Like, I can picture him riding it in jeans and no shirt, you know. I mean, talk about queer culture. I mean, what's going on with Putin, really? You know,
he really likes sitting on large things with his shirt off.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's nothing to read into that, I'm sure, you know.
Oh, surely not. Especially how militantly anti-gay he is.
Yeah, it seems very normal. Can we take a break here to just talk about this as a song? I mean, like, what do you think about it as a song? Are you enjoying it?
No. How about you?
I love it. It's so good. I think the variety of kind of sounds that they get, I think the uniqueness of it, the feeling like it's got kind of the scrappiness, and yet at the same time, I feel like it has good musicality together. You know, it's like there's this element of it that feels unpolished, and like these kind of old goofy guys are singing this song, not being too serious. And then at the same time, I'll get into thinking that, and then they'll make a vocal kind of, I don't know, performance in another part of it where I'm like, wow, these guys are really good. And I think it has some complexity. I think it has some variety of sound. And honestly, there's a lot of things I like about music, a lot of things I appreciate, but the songs I generally listen to are just songs that are kind of high energy and have a lot of just really stimulating, different, weird sound. So this song comes very close to a song that I'll probably put on my playlist, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. It's very rhythmic. It definitely feels like something that you could run to.
Yeah.
I feel like you've got a lot of that on your
try.
Playlist.
For sure. That's what most of my music is, yeah.
So the performance is, what did you think of the performance?
Also great. I was impressed because, of course, first I saw the music video, and then I was impressed by how much of that they were able to bring to the live show. You know, they've got the guy, you know, of course, so there's kind of three big elements. There's the singers dressed as like dictators or whatever, militant generals, whatever. There's the drag queen part, which is on the screen, on the projector screen in the back. And then there's in the video, I think there's like guys riding bombs, but in this, they did kind of a funny thing where it's like towards the end, this guy just kind of lurches in with two big bombs that he's carrying, and he walks up a staircase. He was meant to be
Lenin.
Okay, so Lenin comes in with bombs, and I think he walks up a staircase or something funny like that, where it's kind of nicely understated in a way that feels really ominous. So I thought they made some really clever choices.
Yeah, they really did. And during the performance, I'm sure you noticed that they had T-shirts with little boys' faces on them with their eyes blacked out.
Didn't notice at all.
Oh, really? Okay, that was one of the things. So, I thought for sure, that must be Vladimir Putin as a kid, like something like that. Because it's a black and white photo, the eyes are blacked out, it just looks, but then I noticed that all the faces are different. It turns out they're just random kids, edited, and of course, due to privacy concerns, they block out the identity of the children. There's a lot of symbolism in the performance, both in the music video and in the actual performance of it. Lenin comes out with the bombs. You mentioned that they are dressed as dictators in military regalia. They're also dressed in drag, wearing makeup and dresses.
At the same time, you're saying like under the. Yeah. Wow, I gotta watch this video.
No. At this, like the military dress is military dresses.
You're right. Wow, how did I not notice that? It's so true. They're dresses. They're like it's like the mullet of a dress. It's like military on top, elegance on the bottom. Great.
True elegance on the bottom. So it's a politically charged song, and I think that right now is a really great moment for that, where this was a very queer show, I think, which I'm so happy about. I really do love seeing all of this. This was this got 13th place, which
that's okay.
Some of the earlier and it had reached number 1 on the Croatian charts. Like, cool. It was very, very popular. And I do agree. The rhythmic kind of military thing at the beginning is cool, and the singing part toward the end is really interesting. It's just that part in the middle where they intentionally kind of distort it. It just throws me off entirely.
Yeah, I could see. I'm sure that's not your thing at all. Yeah. Is Belarus in Eurovision? I think not.
No,
right?
no.
How come? They just didn't qualify, or they never.
Russia, when Russia was said you're not allowed back, Belarus said, "Okay, fine, then we're not coming."
So Belarus is doing it out of solidarity for Russia.
Yeah, Belarus has always been very pro-Russia.
And everyone else in Europe was like, "No, Belarus, don't go." Kind of doing the like Willy Wonka thing, you know.
No, stop, don't, please.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to me to see, like, it's like if you have a Venn diagram of political rebellion and like drag action, how much of it is just like one circle,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I've said quite a lot during this show. I don't think I know what Europe wants. But after seeing this, I think what Europe is really in the mood for right now is punk.
Yeah, okay, I could see it. Yeah, because of course Cha 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 is a runner-up. Pretty punk, and I think a lot of people
overwhelmingly the winner of the popular vote.
Yeah, a lot of people are pretty mad at the jurors or judges or however it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see it.
And a lot of the more popular songs, I mean, other than like Israel, they have some degree of rebellion or punk energy, even through the pop music. And that's, I don't know. I think that Croatia's really having that moment right now and really living in that punk moment.
Not really good news for you, because I don't think punk is really too much in line with your musical sensibilities,
No,
You generally
I'm
like
more
music that sounds
supportive of the punk than in the punk. Like, I see you punking out, and I support it, and you think you should punk out to your heart's content.
You're like
I'm just gonna be.
You're the mom driving the punk performer to the gig, and then sitting in the car and crocheting.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Well, I have been Russell Perkle.
I've been Hannah.
And this has been Getting Down and Wordy, where we take popular music and make it nerdy. Thanks for listening.
That's cute. I like that.
Yeah, pretty good. All right. Remember to check us out on Instagram. You can just find us at Getting Down and Wordy. There, we have a Facebook page as well you can search for. We have Twitter. I don't really go on there anymore. You shouldn't either. So please do not go there on our behalf. You can find many other Mammoth? Yeah, you can find many other great podcasts on our podcast network, Podmoth.network.